You know, if you turn on the radio right now or like flip on a romantic movie, within about, I don't know, 5 minutes, you're going to be hit with a very specific message about love.
Oh, yeah, a very pervasive one.
Right. It's this idea that true love intrinsically means suffering. Like it's pining away. It's enduring endless pain.
The whole dramatic soaking wet screaming match in the rain, right?
Yes, exactly. Followed by the passionate reunion. We just accept that as normal.
We do. It's the I can't live without you, you're my oxygen trope. We're absolutely swimming in it from the time we're teenagers.
But I mean, what if that incredibly intense, painful yearning isn't actually love at all? What if it is quite literally an addiction?
That is the big question.
So welcome to this deep dive into Robin Norwood's groundbreaking work, Women Who Love Too Much. Our mission today is to really unpack why so many people, particularly women, though honestly anyone can fall into this trap, find themselves magnetically drawn to unavailable, troubled, or just frankly unloving partners.
Yeah, and we're going to explore the hidden childhood roots of this behavior. The unconscious dance between a caregiver and a troubled partner.
And why perfectly nice people suddenly seem so, like, agonizingly boring.
Right. It's a fascinating reframe, and whether you're analyzing your own relationship history or trying to understand a friend who perpetually dates the wrong people, this really shifts how we view romance.
Because it completely challenges our most fundamental definitions of what a relationship is actually supposed to feel like.
It does. It forces you to rethink intimacy entirely.
Okay, so let's unpack this core concept first,
Yeah.
because the phrase itself, women who love too much, it almost sounds like a humble brag.
Oh, totally.
Like someone in a job interview saying, oh, my biggest flaw is just that I work too hard and I care too deeply.
Right, the classic non-weakness weakness.
Exactly. But that is absolutely not what this material is talking about here.
No, it's practically the opposite. Loving too much has nothing to do with the depth of your genuine affection or care for someone.
Okay, so what is it then?
It is actually about obsessing over a person and calling that obsession love. It's measuring the depth of your devotion by the depth of your torment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you are constantly agonizing over a relationship, trying to control it, trying to fix a partner who is completely inappropriate or emotionally unavailable and you just cannot let go, that is the clinical definition of loving too much.
And this behavior doesn't just, spontaneously generate in adulthood. The text makes a really compelling case that it almost always traces back to a very specific blueprint.
Yes, a dysfunctional childhood home.
But I want to clarify what that means, because dysfunctional is a heavy word, right? Like,
Yeah.
we tend to reserve it for extreme cases.
We do. We think of active abuse or severe alcoholism. But in this context, a dysfunctional family is defined much more broadly.
Like how?
Well, it's any environment where a child's emotional reality is repeatedly denied. Think about a household where the parents are constantly at each other's throats. The tension in the room is suffocating.
Right, you can cut it with a knife.
Exactly. But when the child asks what's wrong, the parents plaster on a smile and say, everything is fine, we're perfectly happy.
So the child is basically forced to choose between what their own nervous system is telling them and what their trusted caregivers are saying.
Exactly that. And a child will almost always choose to believe the parent.
Because they have to, for survival.
Right. Which means they have to shut off their own internal radar. They learn to tune out their own feelings and perceptions.
And to survive that environment, they often take on rigid roles, right? Like becoming the household peacemaker or the invisible child.
Or the pseudo-adult. Anything just to keep the fragile family ecosystem from completely collapsing.
The psychological toll of that is just massive. And there's a story in the material that brings this to life perfectly. We're introduced to Jill.
Ah, yes. Jill.
Now, on paper, Jill is incredibly successful. She's this petite, brilliant, high-achieving law student. But in her personal life, she is trapped in a cycle of doomed, painful relationships.
And it all traces back to her father.
Right, who is completely emotionally withholding. There's this heartbreaking detail where, at 18 years old, she literally planted herself in front of her father and refused to move until he said the words, "I love you."
Yeah, she practically had to force him into a stiff, awkward hug.
That's so sad.
And the tragedy is that forced hug was the absolute closest thing to affection she ever received from him.
Jeez.
So Jill grew up with this deeply internalized belief that if her father didn't love her, it must be her fault. She just wasn't good enough, or smart enough, or agreeable enough.
She spent her entire childhood trying to win a case that was fundamentally unwinnable.
Exactly. Because the judge, her father, was just incapable of ruling in her favor.
So when Jill enters the dating pool as an adult, she is bringing all of that emotional starvation with her.
She's starving for it.
And there is a great psychological maxim mentioned here. Hungry people make poor shoppers.
It's such a sharp way to look at it.
It really is. It's like going to the grocery store when you haven't eaten in 2 days. You don't take your time in the produce aisle, carefully selecting nutritious vegetables.
No, you sprint to the middle aisles.
Right. You grab the brightest, most processed bag of junk food you can find. You do it because you are desperate for immediate relief, not because it's actually going to nourish you.
And in romantic terms, it looks like hunger on the surface, but it's actually something more insidious.
What do you mean?
It's familiarity. Because she is starved for validation, she doesn't evaluate if a man is emotionally healthy or capable of partnership.
Oh, I see.
Her unconscious mind simply zeroes in on the familiar dynamic of a man who is distant, withholding, or chaotic. Because to her brain, that is what love looks like.
But wait, I have to push back here. Jill is a law student. She's clearly brilliant, highly logical, and driven. She studies evidence for a living.
She does.
So if she is so smart, how is it possible that she can't use that massive intellect to see that her romantic choices are completely failing her?
Well, because intellect, no matter how sharp, is usually no match for this level of deep, unconscious childhood conditioning.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and this actually raises a fascinating point about how we try to maintain control. Let's look at who Jill ended up marrying.
Right, Paul. She met this guy named Paul in a sleazy laundromat bar.
And Paul ended up being physically abusive, and he would completely disappear for days at a time.
And how did Jill, the brilliant law student, cope with this? She blamed herself.
Which seems completely counterintuitive, right?
Totally. Why would you actively take the blame for someone else's violent or negligent behavior?
It relies on a mechanism called control through self-blame.
Okay, how does that work?
Think about the logic. If it is her fault that Paul hits her or disappears, then it means she has the power to fix it.
Oh, man. So if she just cooks a better dinner or keeps the house cleaner.
Or learns to argue less, exactly, she thinks he will magically transform into a loving husband.
That is so dark.
Blaming herself is a desperate unconscious strategy to maintain a sense of control in a terrifyingly uncontrollable situation.
Because to admit the truth, that Paul is simply an abuser and her father was simply incapable of love, that means facing total helplessness.
Precisely. It's a survival mechanism.
Wow. So she takes on all this agonizing blame just to keep the hope alive. If she's the problem, she can be the solution.
The psychological math checks out perfectly, even if it's destructive.
And that leads us right into the next major compulsion these women face, doesn't it?
It does. Because Jill was starved for love because her father withheld it.
Right. But what happens when a child isn't just starved for affection, but is actually forced to become the parent?
That totally shifts the dynamic. It goes from a hunger for love to an absolute compulsion to rescue.
The savior trap. And the material gives us a stunning look at this through the life of Melanie.
Oh, Melanie's story is so intense.
Her daily routine is exhausting just to read about. She's a nursing student, she is solely raising 3 young kids, and her husband, Sean, contributes absolutely nothing to the household.
He's an incredibly handsome actor and photographer, right?
Supposedly. He constantly runs off to New York for auditions, he openly cheats on her, and he literally survives on allowance money his own mother sends him.
And Melanie just carries this crushing burden without a single complaint.
Which is wild. She is firmly convinced that with enough patience, she can make him see the light and grow up.
Well, to understand how Melanie ended up here, we have to look at her origin story as a savior.
Right, the childhood dynamic again.
Melanie's mother was severely mentally ill and tragically committed suicide in the family garage when Melanie was still young.
That's horrifying.
It is. But long before the suicide, the mother was a ghost in the house. So Melanie stepped into the void. She became the mom to her siblings.
And she became the primary emotional partner to her father. She ran the house. She managed all the chaos.
And here is where the psychoanalysis gets truly mind-bending. The text brings up a normal childhood developmental phase.
The edible thing.
Yes. The idea that it's completely natural for a young child to unconsciously wish they could have their opposite-sex parent all to themselves.
Right, like a little girl might innocently say, "Daddy, let's live in our own house without Mommy." It's just a phase.
Exactly. But for Melanie, that terrifying magical wish essentially came true.
Oh my God.
The mother disappeared into illness and then death, and Melanie actually did get her father all to herself. She stepped fully into the mother's shoes.
And when a child's magical, omnipotent wish like that actually manifests in reality, the psychological consequences are devastating.
They really are. The analysis points to three specific outcomes for Melanie. The first is a crushing unconscious guilt.
Wait, so if she thinks she magically caused her mother to disappear just by wishing for it, she must grow up thinking she has an insane amount of power.
Yes, like a literal God complex.
So she thinks she can just magically fix her husband, Sean, through sheer willpower.
You are hitting on the exact core mechanism. That is the ultimate consequence. Because she believed her sheer willpower kept her childhood family functioning after her mother's death, she genuinely believes her willpower can fix anyone.
Wow.
She has an ingrained belief in her own omnipotence. But alongside that God complex comes the need to atone.
Because she feels guilty about replacing her mother.
Exactly. She replaced her mother died, and so Melanie carries a lifelong need for punishment and martyrdom to pay for that perceived sin.
Which perfectly explains why she endures Sean's cheating and financial draining without complaint.
Yep, she feels she has to suffer to balance the cosmic scales.
That is just, it's a lot. What was the third consequence?
The final consequence is a deep discomfort with her own sexuality.
Because of the emotional closeness with the father.
Yes, because that closeness had unconscious taboo undertones, she learned to heavily suppress her sexuality to keep things safe.
So as an adult, she isn't looking for a passionate, romantic, equal partner.
No, she is looking for a dependent to take care of. Her relationships are entirely based on caretaking, not mutual adult intimacy.
So her chaotic life with Sean isn't just a string of bad luck. She doesn't just tolerate the chaos. She actually requires it.
She relies on it.
Think about the alternative. If Sean suddenly woke up tomorrow as a responsible, loving, equal partner, Melanie would lose her entire identity.
Absolutely.
Without a crisis to manage, all that terrifying, buried childhood panic, the reality of being a motherless child with the weight of the world on her shoulders, would finally bubble up to the surface.
She is literally using Sean's bad behavior as a shield against her own trauma. She is surviving by caretaking.
If she stops rescuing, she has to start feeling.
Exactly.
Now, you listening might be thinking, well, my childhood wasn't that traumatic and I've never married a deadbeat actor. But this dynamic scales down to everyday life, doesn't it?
Oh, it's incredibly common.
Like, it's the partner who constantly forgets to pay the bills, so you have to step in and manage the finances. Or the person who can't manage their own schedule, forcing you to play their personal assistant.
Right. We find these little ways to make ourselves indispensable so we don't have to face the vulnerability of just being loved for who we are.
But it brings up a major paradox in these relationships. If they're so burdensome, so full of anxiety, and so emotionally unfulfilling, how do they sustain themselves for years?
That leads us right into the illusion of good sex in a bad relationship.
Yes, the story of Trudy.
This one is intense.
We meet Trudy right after she has literally driven her car off a cliff. She had been trapped in this intense, agonizing affair with a married man named Jim.
And she basically isolated herself for an entire summer, just sitting by the phone waiting for him to call.
Just brutal anxiety. Then one day, she sees him out in public, looking perfectly happy with his wife and kids. She snaps, drives into the hills, and sends her car over a cliff.
Miraculously, she survives.
She does. But her most agonizing question for her therapist wasn't about the crash. It was, how could the sex between us be so good, make us both feel so wonderful, and bring us so close together when we really had nothing else going for us?
It's a profound question, and it gets to the root of how biology can trick us.
Trick us how?
Well, in these toxic dynamics, sex isn't an expression of mutual vulnerability or trust. For Trudy, sex was a multi-tool.
What do you mean?
She was using it to manipulate Jim, to soothe him, to try and force him to choose her over his wife.
Oh, wow.
She was measuring her entire self-worth by her ability to sexually arouse him.
But why does it actually feel so incredible in the moment? Like, Trudy wasn't faking it. She felt an explosive connection.
Let's slow down and look at the actual physiological mechanism here, because it is mind-blowing.
Okay, lay it on me.
A sexual climax is, biologically speaking, a massive discharge of physical tension.
Right.
Now think about Trudy's baseline state of mind all summer. She is constantly waiting, constantly anxious, constantly frustrated, and terrified of losing him.
So she's just a walking ball of stress.
Exactly. The relationship itself is a pressure cooker of negative tension. So when they finally get together and have sex, the physical release of all that accumulated agonizing anxiety is incredibly intense.
Wait, so Our nervous systems are literally tricking us.
Basically, yes.
The relationship causes all this horrific stress, and then the sex temporarily relieves that exact stress, and the brain misinterprets that biological relief as a soulmate connection.
Yes. It feels like a profound emotional bond, but it's really just a temporary chemical reprieve from the torment the relationship itself is inflicting on you.
That is terrifying. We are
Man.
biologically rewarding ourselves for being in pain.
It is a brutal cycle. And it really reminds me of how the text brings in the Greek concepts of love, because culturally we conflate two very different things.
Right, the Greeks were much more precise about this. They distinguished clearly between eros and agape.
Exactly.
So eros is passionate love, but the literal translation implies a state of suffering, right?
It does. Eros is fueled by obstacles, by intense longing, by the fact that you absolutely cannot fully have the person.
It's Romeo and Juliet. It's high drama, secret rendezvous, and the thrill of the chase.
And on the other end of the spectrum is agape. Agape is stable, committed, deeply caring partnership.
Based on mutual trust and shared values.
Right, reliability, and crucially, a lack of drama. It is comforting and secure.
I have to push back on the Greeks a little here, though. If agape is purely comfortable and drama-free, doesn't that actually risk becoming a platonic roommate situation?
That's a common fear.
Is the text really saying that healthy romantic love shouldn't have any spark of eros at all?
Well, it's not that healthy love is devoid of passion. It's that in healthy love, the passion stems from mutual discovery and shared joy, not from fear of abandonment.
Oh, that makes sense.
The problem arises when someone whose baseline is trauma only recognizes love if it is accompanied by the agonizing suffering of eros.
Which leads to the absolute tragedy of the woman who loves too much. When she finally meets a kind, stable, reliable person, someone offering genuine agape, she feels completely antsy.
Yes. She labels the person boring.
It's like someone who has spent their entire life riding extreme, terrifying roller coasters.
I love this analogy.
Right. If you suddenly put them in the passenger seat of a luxury sedan driving smoothly down a beautiful scenic highway, they aren't going to enjoy the view.
No, they're going to panic because their stomach isn't dropping.
They think the car must be broken.
That is a perfect analogy. Because for her, if there is no struggle, there is no tension to discharge. There is no high.
And we really have to acknowledge how our culture feeds this.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the movies, the pop music, the romance novels.
They constantly package dysfunction, anxiety, and suffering, put a bow on it, and sell it to us as the ultimate goal.
We are conditioned to think that if your stomach isn't tied in sick, anxious knots, you aren't really in love.
We've culturally made peace sound boring and severe anxiety sound romantic. It's wild.
It is. So we understand the childhood roots, the savior traps, and the biological illusions of passion.
Now we need to look at the actual mechanics of the relationship itself, because it always takes two to tango.
Right. Norwood describes this dynamic as a dance, a perfectly interlocking puzzle of neuroses.
And to see how this dance works in practice, we look at Lisa.
Lisa is a fascinating case. She's an artist, and we learn she has this incredibly faded, corny poem framed on the wall of her studio called My Dear Mother.
Which is wild because her actual mother was a severe, negligent alcoholic. Lisa spent her entire childhood hyper-focused on trying to save her mom.
And to escape that environment, she runs off to Mexico and marries a gay man who basically just needed her as a social cover.
But she eventually flees that marriage, too.
Yes, and ends up with Gary, a severe drug addict who, at a fit of rage, takes a knife and slashes 3 years' worth of her beautiful paintings to shreds.
Unbelievable. Why does she stay in these situations?
Well, Lisa's behavior here is drawn as a direct parallel to substance abuse.
How so?
Just as her mother used alcohol to numb her pain, Lisa used the chaos of Gary to avoid her own underlying depression.
Oh, so Gary was functionally her drug.
Exactly. The constant, terrifying drama of his addiction kept her adrenaline so high that she never had a quiet moment to stop and feel her own crushing emptiness.
Okay, that explains Lisa's steps in the dance. But we really need to flip the lens here. What about the men on the other side of this?
The partners.
Yeah, why do these specific types of men instinctively gravitate toward women who love too much? Let's look at Tom first.
So Tom was an alcoholic whose life was actively spinning out of control. And he knew his wife, Elaine, was the one on the very first night they met.
How did you know?
He was at a country club dance, completely drunk, trying to show off, and he literally knocked another woman over on the dance floor.
Just a completely humiliating, chaotic moment.
Completely. But instead of being horrified or walking away, Elaine instantly rushed in. She smoothed it over, profusely apologized to the couple, and completely protected Tom from the social consequences of his drinking.
Wow. So for an alcoholic, a woman who will instantly jump in and manage his mess is irresistible.
She didn't offer a partnership, she offered a safe haven for his dysfunction.
He didn't want a wife. He wanted a crisis manager. Okay, that makes total sense for someone whose life is actively falling apart due to substance abuse. But what about highly successful men?
They fall into this dance too. That brings us to Charles.
Okay.
Charles was a highly successful, driven workaholic, and he engaged in a 9-year affair with a woman named Helen.
9 years.
Yes, for nearly a decade, Helen worshipped him. She suffered beautifully, waiting in the wings while he remained married to his wife.
The ultimate Eros dynamic. Constant longing, constant obstacles.
Precisely. But the moment Charles finally got a divorce and actually married Helen, the entire dynamic collapsed.
Wait, what?
The moment he was fully available, Helen completely lost interest. Within 2 years, they were sleeping in separate bedrooms.
Let me get this straight. She had exactly what she waited 9 years for, and she didn't want it.
Because Helen couldn't handle actual intimacy. She needed the distance, the struggle, and the tragic role of the other woman to function.
That is just so sad.
The minute the obstacle of the first wife was removed, Helen had no idea how to just be with Charles in a normal, quiet way.
It really is a flawless, deeply destructive choreography. They instantly recognize each other across a crowded room.
They really do.
When he drops a responsibility, she is already there to catch it. When he pulls away, she instinctively chases. When he creates a massive crisis, she manages it.
They are magnetically attracted to each other on day one because their unconscious minds instantly recognize the steps to the dance they both learned in childhood.
It is a perfect, terrible fit.
And that perfect fit is exactly why it is so incredibly difficult to break the cycle. To stop dancing means you have to step off the floor, stand completely still, and finally feel all the terror and grief you've been running from your entire life.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's distill the core takeaways. Loving too much is not a measure of how deep your love is. It is a measure of unresolved fear and a desperate need for control. Real love shouldn't require you to be a savior, a martyr, or a victim.
And no matter how hard you try, you cannot love someone into being healthy if they don't want to change.
Such a crucial point.
I would encourage you, the listener, to take a hard look at your own relationships and even the media you consume daily.
Are you mistaking anxiety, fear, and a knot in your stomach for true love?
Right. Are you ignoring kind, stable, reliable people in your life simply because they don't offer you a chaotic challenge to fix?
And I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to ponder long after you finish listening to this. Think back to that idea of the dance. If you finally decide to stop dancing this chaotic, exhausting routine, and you find yourself in a calm, safe, loving relationship without the constant draining struggle to fix someone, what fills the void?
That's the scary part.
It is. Consider the possibility that the boredom you might feel in a healthy relationship isn't a lack of love at all. Rather, it is the terrifying quiet space where true intimacy, the act of truly knowing someone and allowing yourself to be known rather than just being needed, finally has the room to grow.
It's profound.
So the real question is, are you brave enough to face the quiet?